Welcome to Tuesday Talks, your moment to pause, reflect, and dig deeper. Behind every headline is a bigger story.
The skies lit up. Sirens wailed. For decades, we've watched this shadow war between Israel and Iran, fought through proxies, mostly in the dark,
Always below that threshold of open conflict.
Exactly. But then, suddenly, everything changed. We saw direct missile and drone exchanges, country to country.
It was a really unprecedented military confrontation, laid bare, a dramatic and, frankly, dangerous escalation.
Yeah, this long-running indirect conflict just erupted. A whole new chapter for the region, a risky one.
Well, definitely.
And so we've gathered a whole stack of recent reports, analysis, trying to help cut through the noise. What exactly happened here? And maybe more importantly, based on these sources, what are the potential implications?
Well, our mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We're going to unpack the sequence of events, compare the military capabilities that were on display, according to these sources anyway.
And then zoom out a bit, look at the ripple effects.
Precisely. Especially the most concerning ones, how this whole confrontation could potentially draw in or, impact major global powers.
Okay, so let's dive right into the source material and try to make sense of this really complex situation.
Sounds good.
So the reports are saying this direct exchange really kicked off with a series of Israeli strikes. Operation Rising Lion was the reported code name.
That's right. And the scale the targeting described, it's pretty striking stuff.
Unprecedented strikes for Israel, weren't they?
They really were. The sources detail this kind of dual focus. On one hand, heavy airstrikes targeting key Iranian nuclear sites, trying to hit the heart of their program.
And on the other,
more targeted strikes right in Tehran. The aim, reportedly, was to decapitate the military leadership.
Wow. And the scale mentioned in these sources, it wasn't small. They talk about over 200 Israeli jets.
In the initial waves, yes, hitting upwards of 100 targets across, I think, 5 waves of strikes. It wasn't just one location.
So where did they hit?
The targeting was quite broad. Natanz, which is Iran's main enrichment facility that was confirmed hit by the IAEA. Reports mentioned significant damage there.
Specifically?
An electrical substation, an above-ground pilot plant, things like that. But crucially, the sources also note the deep underground facilities seemed, well, untouched.
And elsewhere?
There were reports of strikes near Isfahan, another nuclear site potentially. Also, missile development facilities like Bidkane, various air defense systems, the Big Parchin military base, and even Mehrabad Airport in Tehran. It looked like a widespread disruption attempt.
And it wasn't just infrastructure, was it? The sources really highlight targeting key people.
Yes, described as some of the most important figures in Iran's military and their nuclear programs. That's where that decapitation idea comes in.
What are we talking about?
The reports list several very high-profile names. Major General Hussein Salami, head of the IRGC. Major General Mohammad Bagheri, the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, formerly the highest military spot under the Supreme Leader.
Very names.
Very. Also, Ali Shamkhani, an aide to the Supreme Leader. Ali Hajizadeh, the IRGC Air Force Commander. Ghulam Ali Rashid, Deputy Commander-in-Chief. The sources suggest this was, highly strategic targeting.
And scientists, too. Not just military leaders.
That's right. At least 9 scientists reported killed, including Mohammad Mehdi Taranchi, a theoretical physicist, university president, and Faridun Abbasi, who actually used to head Iran's Atomic Energy Organization.
So the idea was...
Well, one source put it quite starkly. The aim was to destroy the brains behind the program. Cripple the intellectual core, not just the leadership.
Destroy the brains. That phrase really tells you something about the intent described here. What was Israel's public justification for all this?
Prime Minister Netanyahu stated publicly it was necessary to stop Iran getting nuclear weapons, framed it as an existential threat. He claimed Iran had enough highly enriched uranium for, 9 weapons, and could make one quickly.
So the nuclear threat was the core reason given.
That's how it was presented in the sources, yes. The central justification.
And Iran's side, how did they report the impact?
Well, Iran's UN envoy reported pretty significant casualties. They claimed at least 78 killed, over 320 injured. And they maintained most were civilians, accusing Israel of hitting civilian areas, not just military or nuclear sites.
Okay, so that was Israel's major move. How did Iran hit back?
Their response was publicly called True Promise 3. State media reported launching hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones directly at Israel.
Hundreds. What was that like on the ground in Israel?
The sources paint a really dramatic scene. Skies over Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, lit up all night. Incoming missiles, drones, interceptors firing, reports of destruction, people forced into shelters.
Casualties in Israel.
Yes, search and rescue efforts were mentioned for people trapped in destroyed homes. The report cited at least 3 people killed in Israel, dozens injured from the Iranian strikes.
And Israel's reaction to Iran hitting potentially civilian areas.
Very strong. The defense minister, Israel Katz, was quoted vowing a very heavy price, said Iran crossed red lines by firing at what Israel called civilian centers.
And this wasn't just a one-off exchange, right? It continued.
No, it kept going. Overnight into Saturday, the sources reported more Israeli strikes hitting defense arrays in Tehran, Iranian Air Force bases.
So tit-for-tat.
It seems like it. Israel's position was reportedly to continue for as many days as it takes, while Iran said it had no option but to respond, while also repeating its claim the nuclear program is peaceful.
Okay. So an unprecedented direct clash. To understand where this might go, the sources offer this comparison of their military strengths. It's not just about numbers, is it? It's how they fight.
That's a really key point. The comparison shows very different strategic approaches. Take Manpower, for instance.
Right. The sources say Iran has a big numerical advantage. Over 600,000 active, maybe 900,000 plus if you count the Buzzy's militia, the IRGC.
And the IRGC has that huge strategic and political role too. Compare that with Israel. Smaller force, about 170,000 active, but highly trained, plus around 460,000 reservists they can mobilize fast.
So quantity versus quality and readiness.
Sort of, yeah. Iran has the numbers. Israel focuses on training and rapid mobilization.
Okay, air power. The sources seem pretty clear on this one.
They really do. It's a stark contrast. Israel has overwhelming qualitative superiority here. Advanced jets, F-35s, F-15s, F-16s.
And the tech that goes with them.
Exactly. Precision strike capability and, crucially, deeply integrated ISR intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. Their ability to see, track, and hit targets in real time is apparently world-class.
Whereas Iran
relies on an older, frankly outdated fleet. They depend much more on ground-based surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, for air defense rather than trying to dominate the skies themselves.
But Iran has put its efforts elsewhere. Missiles and drones, that's their asymmetric strength.
Absolutely. Iran has the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. The sources stress the sheer quantity and the range, 300 up to 2,000 kilometers.
Prime numbers.
All of Israel, easily, plus parts of Europe, Central Asia, and importantly, their launchers are dispersed, some underground. Hard to find, hard to hit.
And drones, too. They've become a major player there.
A huge player. Models like the Shahed 136 kamikaze drone, the Mohajer 6. They've supplied them widely to proxies, and reportedly even to Russia for use in Ukraine.
Israel has missiles, too, though.
Right.
High-precision ones like LORA, the Jericho missiles, part of their deterrent.
Right. Smaller numbers, perhaps, but very precise. And advanced drone tech, too, though maybe not Iran's sheer volume.
Okay, so if Iran launches hundreds of missiles and drones, how does Israel stop them? Missile defense.
This is where Israel has another major technological edge. That multi-layered defense network is key.
Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow 2 and 3.
Exactly. Covering different ranges. Developed with a lot of U.S. help, it's battle-proven, intercepted thousands of projectiles over the years, according to the sources.
And Iran's defenses.
They're modernizing. They have systems like the Russian S-300, their own Bavar 373. But the fact that recent Israeli strikes apparently got through in multiple places raises questions about how consistent or effective their network is compared to Israel's.
What about at sea? Naval capabilities.
Different focus again. Iran, especially the IRGC Navy, is geared towards regional disruption. Littoral warfare close to shore. Swarms of fast boats, mines, anti-ship missiles.
Aimed at choking points like Hormuz.
Potentially, yes. That's a major capability disrupting shipping in vital waterways. They also have diesel submarines.
Israel's Navy.
Smaller, but more advanced technologically. Things like their Dolphin-class submarines, widely believed to give them an underwater second strike capability. Part of their strategic deterrence picture.
Okay, cyber. Both are big players.
Major players, yes, but with different strengths highlighted in the sources. Israel is seen as leading in offensive cyber ops and how they integrate that with intelligence.
Stuxnet being the famous example.
Exactly. And units like Unit 8200 are key to that integration, feeding real-time data for targeting.
And Iran's cyber posture.
Significant capability, very persistent, linked to large-scale attacks on critical infrastructure, banks, energy targets globally, often used to complement kinetic actions or support their proxies.
Which brings us to proxies. The axis of resistance. The sources suggest this is maybe the biggest strategic difference.
It could well be. Iran has cultivated this huge network, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen.
What does that network give them?
It enables asymmetric warfare, allows Iran to project power, harass its enemies, open multiple fronts far from its own borders, often without initially using its own national army directly.
Whereas Israel's strategy is more about preemption, targeted strikes.
And disruption, yes. Relying on their intelligence superiority, targeted operations, rather than building their own proxy network in the same way.
And underpinning all of this military calculation, the nuclear question.
Absolutely. That's the core tension driving so much of this.
Israel's position, widely believed to have nukes, but they don't confirm or deny. Nuclear ambiguity.
Right. Estimates vary, maybe 80 to 200 warheads, various delivery methods. It's a functional deterrent, even if undeclared.
And Iran, they deny wanting weapons.
They maintain the program is peaceful, yes, but their enrichment progress is the big concern. The IAEA recently reported over 408 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%.
What does that mean practically?
Well, according to the sources, that amount is technically enough material for maybe 9 or 10 nuclear warheads if they enrich it further to weapons grade.
So they're right at the threshold.
At the threshold, yes. But crucially, the reports state they haven't yet made that final push to weapons grade or actually built a bomb. Still, being that close is a major factor.
So, wow. We have this incredibly volatile mix. Israel's tech edge, air power, defenses, intel, undeclared nukes versus Iran's numbers. Huge missile drone arsenal, cyber reach, powerful proxy network, and near nuclear capability.
It's a complex standoff, and this volatile mix is exactly why those potential ripple effects, the worst-case scenarios discussed in the sources, are so critical to understand, especially how global powers could get involved. That impacts everyone.
Yeah, this is where it stops being just regional and hits the global stage. One huge scenario talked about is America getting dragged in.
Yes, the sources point out that Iran seems to believe the U.S. Tacitly backed Israel's recent strikes, regardless of Washington's official statements.
Which increases the risk.
Dramatically. Risk of Iran or its proxies hitting U.S. targets, bases, personnel, embassies across the Middle East. We saw the U.S. pull some staff, issue warnings.
And the really scary question in these sources is, what if an American is killed? Some reports even suggest Netanyahu might want to pull the U.S. in deeper.
Right, believing maybe only the U.S. has certain capabilities, like bunker busters needed for deep underground sites like Fordo.
That creates a tricky political situation in the U.S., doesn't it?
Hugely.
Yeah.
You have promises of ending forever wars versus strong support for Israel and calls for regime change in Iran, particularly among Republicans. If the U.S. shifts from just defense support to active combat, launching its own strikes, the sources call that a massive escalation. Unpredictable global consequences.
Another scenario, Gulf nations getting pulled in.
If Iran struggles to hit Israel effectively due to its defenses, the sources suggest they might pivot. Target softer infrastructure, maybe energy facilities in nearby Gulf countries.
Especially countries they think helped Israel or the U.S.
Exactly. We've seen precedents attacks on Saudi oil fields, Houthi strikes on the UAE, and remember, many Gulf states host U.S. bases. Some apparently gave quiet help to Israel recently, sharing radar data or airspace.
So if they get hit,
the expectation, according to the sources, is they demand U.S. defense. That pulls America in even deeper, potentially widening the war across the region.
And beyond direct military involvement, there's the economic shockwave potential.
This is a big one in all the sources. Oil prices are already jumpy. This conflict is right in the world's energy heartland.
The Strait of Hormuz risk.
Very real. If Iran tries to close or seriously disrupt it, that's about a fifth of the world's oil supply right there. Plus, the Houthis could ramp up attacks in the Red Sea again.
And if oil supplies are squeezed,
prices shoot up. That fuels global inflation, hits the cost of living, something you feel directly.
And there's a specific global power angle here too.
Yes, and it's quite direct. Rising oil prices significantly benefit Russia. Higher revenues help fund Putin's war in Ukraine. So Middle East escalation driving up oil prices directly impacts another major global conflict in Europe. It shows how interconnected everything is.
Wow. Okay, one last scenario mentioned, maybe the most unpredictable. The idea of the Iranian regime actually falling.
Some of Netanyahu's statements, addressing Iranians directly, hint that a longer-term goal might be to trigger internal collapse in Tehran.
But the sources raise a huge question mark there, don't they?
They do. What happens after? If a strong, centralized, even authoritarian government like Iran's suddenly disappears, what fills the vacuum?
Parallels with Iraq, Libya.
Exactly. Those situations became chaotic. The sources highlight the massive risk of internal conflict, civil war, regional instability if Iran fractures. Regime change might sound simple, but the reality could be far messier, potentially needing more outside involvement.
So let's bring this all back home. For you, the listener, why does digging into these military details, these worst-case scenarios, particularly the global angles, why does it matter?
Well, because these events, even if they seem far away, are tangled up with global stability. They can genuinely impact your life. Wider conflict affects security everywhere.
And the economic side.
Definitely. Energy prices, inflation that hits your wallet, understanding the roles of the US, Russia, the potential chaos of power vacuums. It just shows how events over there don't stay over there for long. They ripple outwards. These sources hopefully give you a shortcut to grasping those connections.
So this deep dive, using these recent reports, gives us a snapshot.
Yeah.
It's volatile, it's clearly evolving. We've unpacked that unprecedented direct exchange, looked at the different strengths Israel and Iran bring, and explored these really significant risks for escalation and global impact.
It's essential context, really, for understanding the complexities and just how dangerous the path forward could be.
And maybe here's a final thought for you to take away, especially thinking about those global implications. With such different military tools, such deep-seated hostility, and such incredibly high-stakes nuclear potential, regional stability, the global economy, U.S. and Russian interests tangled up in it, can this direct fight really stay just between Israel and Iran? Or, as these sources seem to suggest with all these potential ripple effects, are we inevitably on a path towards wider entanglement, drawing in the region, and maybe even the world? Something to keep in mind as this situation develops.